Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Beck LP, Morning Phase. Beck, singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer, and musical eccentric who came up in the 90s with a pretty diverse sound on hit records such as Mellow Gold and Odelay. These albums essentially being mishmashes of alternative rock, funk, hip-hop, and lo-fi music as well, and Beck's entire discography reflects that very same diversity as well. From the really oddball musical experiments and the strange tape recordings on stereo soul manure, to the very freaky funk on the album Midnight Vultures, and then there's the freak folk record One Foot in the Grave, personally my favorite of Beck's. Then there's the really odd poppy appeal of his biggest records, and then there's the Information and Hierro, albums that take the sound of Beck's 90s output but give it a slightly more electronic edge on a lot of the tracks. And then there's the very folky, singer-songwriter-esque, toned down and somber sounds that come through on albums like Mutations and Sea Change. And with all of these shifts in sound and style and mood, of course, there are some personal low points and high points for me throughout Beck's discography. I personally have always been more of a fan of Beck's poppier side, of his more eccentric and freaky side, not so much the syrupy, slow-mo, sad songs that make up a majority of a few of his records. However, this era in Beck's career is a favorite for a lot of people. And I get it, sometimes songs in that mood are just what you want to hear, and on top of it, I think Beck's voice, his very deep voice, lends itself to this kind of songwriting. A lot of people do consider records like Sea Change to be one of his best. And the record is definitely his biggest success when it comes to making music in that gloomier, folkier style, and now with this newest record of his, Beck is revisiting that sound with what I've been told is kind of the companion record to that record. And going into this LP, part of me is psyched because, of course, this could be an opportunity for this side of Beck's persona to finally click with me, and unfortunately, once again, that was just not the case. While Sea Change and Mutations a lot of the time don't really move me emotionally, I do see the appeal in those records, and it just wouldn't feel right to me to call those albums bland or uninteresting. However, those descriptions somehow feel right when it comes to me talking about this. Morning Phase is essentially the equivalent to waking up after a long night's sleep and quickly realizing that absolutely nothing cool is going to happen today. That's pretty much the tone the album sets on its 40-second introduction, which has all these very turgid, overinflated string sections kicking off the album that, while they do feel really huge and lavish, there's absolutely no emotion to be pulled from them at all. They may sound pretty in theory, but they're a little too reserved to convey much of anything. And to me, that is many of the songs on this record in a nutshell. I think Beck and I think these tracks overall are just a little too concerned with their own sense of bliss to actually pull off anything worth remembering. Even on one of the lead singles from this LP, Blue Moon, which I think is one of the most underwhelming tracks on this LP, Beck starts singing, "I'm so tired of being alone," and it just comes off so melodramatic, just pulling for something that's not there. This track and many others on here just emotionally gutless, and compositionally when it comes to the melodies as well as the chord progressions and the rhythms. The songs on this record feel so incredibly basic. And yeah, for sure, the aesthetic is intentional. Beck is not trying to make any kind of sudden, loud, or shocking moves on this record because it would not be in line with the blissful and very soft and easygoing tone. However, with its softness, with its blissfulness, I don't think this record is that seductive. It's not that intoxicating either. So because Beck is trying to keep things simple, a lot of the time he does not build on this very basic foundational instrumentation. Rarely does the instrumentation on this record feel tangible or meaty, because for the most part, the inoffensive sounds of reverb and moaning vocals are pretty much what's on the menu. Occasionally on these tracks there is a bit of a stylistic shift, with some of these songs showing off a bit of a 60s psychedelic pop vibe, like on the track Blackbird Chain. And the song Wave was one of the few tracks here that actually gripped me because it had this very huge minor toned orchestral string section hanging in the background. It was easily one of the darker tracks on this entire record. The strings on this track really make this thing a highlight on the entire LP, and occasionally there is a drum beat or a guitar part that just feels a shade sharper than usual on these songs, sort of like on the track Say Goodbye. But because a lot of the instrumentation tries to take such a simple approach, what's being played feels kind of cliche, because the chord progressions, the very basic melodies, not that I think they're directly ripping off any one track, but because they're so simple in their approach, they kind of sound like everything. The song Turn Away, which in comparison with the other tracks has just these driving finger-picked guitars, is actually a bit of a saving grace on this LP and actually gives one of these songs a pulse, whereas most of the other songs on this thing are flatlining. Still, I love the eerie lead guitar melodies on this thing. The vocal melodies are great as well. The tight vocal harmonies are nice. To me, this track reminds me of like a Fleetwood Mac song or something, but with a much darker tone. And there's a really detailed melodic progression that sits through two of the verses on this track in the first half. It really is a song that I love, and the only song that I loved on this entire record. But the thing is, a lot of Beck's fans, and Beck as well, obviously feel that there is something to playing songs at this speed, with this level of sparseness, and I've been seeing it get rave reviews as well, and it's just, I don't know, either flying over me, flying under me, it's just not hitting me at all. I'm feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And where does this album sit in your ranking of your favorite Beck records? Let me know. Also, are you a banana man? I'm a banana man. Beck, Morning Phase, forever.